Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mu'min and Mu'minat, Assalamu alaikum. I am Shaukat Nahwi, and thank you for joining Astaana-e-Zehra's final Majlis of this week's series on the Sunday, the 2nd of Safar and the 20th of September 2020. Tonight's Majlis will also be focused on the Masa'ib of Bibi Sakina Salamullahi alayha. And we will begin the Majlis with the recitation of Hadith Kisa by Sami Jafari, followed by Soz, Salam, and Marcia by Astaana-e-Zehra, supported by Mohsin Nahwi and Abbas Nahwi. And now, Sami Jafari.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليه السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت دخل علي بي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال السلام عليك يا فاطمة فقلت عليك السلام. قال إني أجد في بدني ضعفا فقلت له أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به. فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت وعليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله. أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه. السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله. أتأذن لي أن أدخل معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام ويا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن أمي رسول الله. فقلت نعم ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله. أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسيئي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله. أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرف الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وهامتي لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا هرب لمن حاربهم مسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم. فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرض مضية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمس مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فقال جبريل يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض ليكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبريل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي والأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرض مضية ولا قمر منيرا ولا شمس مضية ولا فلك يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلك يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء، اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله وليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا، اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله والذي بعثني بالحق نبي واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيه محموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا تعلم حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد، اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد، اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
اجازت دے دی اور کو شبیر نے کیا رنگ کی اجازت دے دی نار کو نور کیا اور شہادت دے دی نار کو نور کیا اور شہادت دے دی کیا سخاوت ہے حسین ابن علی کی واللہ کیا سخاوت ہے حسین ابن علی کی واللہ جام کوثر کا دیا رہنے کو جلنا دے دی پر کو شبیر نے جب گل ہوا چراغے حرم ملک شام میں جب گل ہوا چراغے حرم ملک شام میں یعنی سکینہ مر گئی یاد امام میں دیکھے ستم یزید کے دربار عام میں شہ کے سلام کو گئی دارالسلام میں دنیا میں داد رسنا ملا داد خواہ کو دنیا میں داد رسنا ملا داد خواہ کو جا کر نشان تماچوں کے دکھلائے شاہ کو جب گل ہوا چراغے خانہ کعبہ سا کوئی گھر نظر آتا نہیں خانہ کعبہ سا کوئی گھر نظر آتا نہیں اور مکی کوئی بجوز حیدر نظر آتا نہیں گھر نظر آتا نہیں. اے نبی دینے کو دے دیجئے جسے چاہے اللہ. اے نبی دینے کو دے دیجئے جسے چاہے اللہ. ان میں کوئی فاتح خیبر نظر آتا نہیں. ان میں کوئی فاتح خیبر نظر آتا نہیں. خانہ کعبہ سا کوئی گھر نظر آتا نہیں. اے بتو جھک جاؤ سجدے کو اسی میں خیر ہے. اے بتو جھک جاؤ سجدے میں اسی میں خیر ہے. کون ہے دوش پیغمبر پر نظر آتا نہیں. کون ہے دوش پیغمبر پر نظر آتا نہیں. خانہ کعبہ سا کوئی گھر نظر آتا نہیں. اے نبی دینے کو دے دیجئے جسے چاہے اللہ. اے نبی دینے کو دے دیجئے جسے چاہے اللہ. ان میں کوئی فاتح خیبر نظر آتا نہیں. خانہ کعبہ سا کوئی گھر نظر آتا نہیں. ہے جوان بیٹے کا غم بے نور آنکھیں ہو گئی. ہے جوان بیٹے کا غم بے نور آنکھیں ہو گئی. شاہدی کو لاشے اکبر نظر آتا نہیں. شاہدی کو لاشے اکبر نظر آتا نہیں. خانہ کعبہ سا کوئی گھر نظر آتا نہیں. گود خالی دیکھ کر مادر کی صغرا نے کہا. گود خالی دیکھ کر مادر کی صغرا نے کہا. کیا ہوا اماں میرا اصغر نظر آتا نہیں. کیا ہوا اماں میرا اصغر نظر آتا نہیں. خانہ کعبہ سا کوئی گھر نظر آتا نہیں. اور ماں کی کوئی بجز حیدر نظر آتا نہیں. خانہ کعبہ سا کوئی زندان میں جب کہ دختر شبیر مر گئے. زندان میں جب کہ دختر شبیر مر گئی. دنیا سے دفتن سفر خلد کر گئی. کلبے کے دل پہ داغ جدائی کا در گئی. گل پر گیا حسین کی عاشق گزر گئی، غل پر گیا حسین کی عاشق گزر گئی، جنت بسائی چھوڑ کے دنیا کے باغ کو، تازہ کیا ہے پھر علی اصغر کے داغ کو، تازہ کیا ہے پھر علی اصغر کے داغ کو، بازو ہلا کے بانوئے ناشاد نے کہا، بی بی پدر کے سر سے اٹھاؤ تو سر ذرا، باتیں ابھی تو کرتی تھی آنسو بہا بہا، ساقط ہے نبض ہائے غضب سرد دست و پا، ساقط ہے نبض ہائے غضب سرد دست و پا، منہ دیکھتے ہی زیس کا نقشہ بدل گیا، کس وقت سانس رک گئی کب دم نکل گیا، کس وقت سانس رک گئی کب دم نکل گیا، کس وقت سانس رک گئی کب دم نکل گیا، قربان جاؤں مرنے کی ماں کو خبر نہ کی، باری میرے ریاض پہ تم نے نظر نہ کی، یہ رات ماں کے ساتھ تڑپ کر بسر نہ کی، جی بھر کے بھی زیارت روح پدر نہ کی، جی بھر کے بھی زیارت روح پدر نہ کی، چوتھے برس میں ہائے سدار جہان سے، دکھ قید کے نہ اٹھ سکے ننھی سی جان سے، دکھ قید کے نہ اٹھ سکے ننھی سی جان کے، دکھ قید کے نہ اٹھ سکے ننھی سی جان سے، ماں صدقے جائے آج تڑپتے تھے شام سے، روٹھی ہوئی تھی مادر ناشاد کام سے، مر کر ملے حسین علیہ السلام سے، بی بی کہو گلے ہوئے کیا کیا امام سے، بی بی کہو گلے ہوئے کیا کیا امام سے، یوں منہ کو موڑنا تو محبت سے دور ہے، قربان جاؤں ماں کا بھلا کیا قصور ہے، قربان جاؤں ماں کا بھلا کیا قصور ہے، قربان جاؤں ماں کا بھلا کیا قصور ہے، لو ہاتھ جوڑتی ہے یہ ماں اے سکینہ جان، مجھ کو بلا لو تم ہو جہاں اے سکینہ جان، ڈھونڈوں نکل کے تم کو کہاں اے سکینہ جان، مادر کو قبر ہے یہ مکان ہے سکینہ جان، مادر کو قبر ہے یہ مکان ہے سکینہ جان، مادر کو قبر ہے یہ مکان ہے سکینہ جان، میں جانتی ہوں موت سے بدتر حیات ہے، اب کون سوئے گا میرے پہلو میں رات کو، اب کون سوئے گا میرے پہلو میں رات کو، اب کون سوئے گا میرے پہلو میں رات کو، قربان جاؤں قیدیے دامے بلا ہے ماں، पे नबी मुब्तला है मजबूर है गरीब है बेदस्त पा है बीबी को दे कहाँ से कफन पेरदा है बीबी को दे कहाँ से कफन पेरदा है बीबी को दे कहाँ से कफन बेरदा है पहले से खाक में है बतन सब अटा हुआ ले जाओ कब्र में यही कुर्ता फटा हुआ ले जाओ कब्र में यही कुर्ता फटा हुआ ले जाओ कब्र में यही कुर्ता फटा हुआ जिंदा में जब के दुख्तरे
Jazakallah, Sami Jafari for the recitation of Hadith Kisa, and Ahsan Zaidam and his supporters for the recitation of Soz, Salam, and Marsiya. Mu'min and Mu'minat, this is the final Majlis of this week's series dedicated to the Masayib of Bibi Sakina Salamullahi Alayha and brought to you by the Jafari family. We are very thankful for their generous support. May Allah shower His blessings upon the family in this life and the life hereafter. Our next series of Majlis, observing the events of Karbala, Kufa, and Sham, will inshallah begin this coming Thursday, which is the September 24th at 8 p.m. inshallah. Thursday's Majlis is sponsored by the families of Saghir Abid, Ejaz Khizalbash, Saeed Zaidi, Javed Rizvi, and Shahinshah Hussain. So please join us this coming Thursday at 8 p.m. Mu'min and Mu'minat, before I invite our special guest speaker for this evening, would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the Astana community to thank Moulana Sayyid Ali Abbas Razawi for delivering some electrifying, intellectual, enlightening speeches over the last 3 nights. And without any delay, I would like to now invite Moulana Sahab to address tonight's final Majlis. Moulana Sahab.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم رجسه وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم أما بعد. Our series of discussions have gone into its final night. What started 4 nights ago, as is the nature of time, is coming to its conclusion. There's much to say, there's much to discuss. But as is the nature of these things, another couple of days go by. In fact, what started on the 1st of Muharram is slowly leaving us. We're now in the month of Safar. And the month of Safar is one of the most difficult, or the most difficult month of the entire year. For this purpose, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has given us certain amal to do in this month. You may notice that illnesses, deaths, and all sorts of other calamities befall people in the month of Safar. So now, before we start, just a couple of things. Had it not been for the Prophet leaving behind dua, I wouldn't be mentioning this as I am at the moment. See, though we've talked about the benefits of bala, the fact is nobody likes it to come into their life. And where Allah has given us options to recite, to pray, to supplicate, to remove them, why not take full advantage of them? Generally, there's 2 units of prayer which is recited on the first of every month. And in this condition, you can recite it up to 2-3 days after, I would suggest, if the opportunity is there, if you haven't done tonight, 2 units of prayers. First rak'ah, 30 times Qul Huwallah. Second rak'ah, 30 times again Surah Qadr. And if you go to the Fatih, open it up, you'll see that there's a couple of verses of the Quran you're also meant to recite. You can do that, that's well and good. Specifically, nevertheless, if you were to go online, du'as.org, whatever it may be, you'll see there's a dua for Safar that you're meant to recite 10 times. I would suggest reciting it 10 times every single day. Certain days are heavy, certain times are heavy. This is that month for us where we'll be commemorating the Shahada of Rasulullah. This month begins, what began with the death of Bibi Sakina. And in this way, this month becomes tough. So if you can do these 2 things, it's very beneficial. And you'll see we'll go on, because look, remember, specific times have been given to specific things. If you go into your books, you'll see that there's a specific time when you're meant to, for example, cut your nails. There's a specific time when we're meant to do istikhara, for example. There's specific times that we're meant to do dua. To give you an example again, they say that when the children of Yaqub came to him, having committed the indecency of effectively wanting to kill their brother and selling him off to traders, when they came to Yaqub, they said they confessed the fact that they've committed a very big sin. And they asked him to pray for them and to ask Allah, seek Allah's repentance for them. Now, what does Yaqub say? He says, soon I will pray for you, right? He doesn't pray for them immediately. Hadith says that he was waiting for Thursday night to come. This is Wali and Ma'soom, whose dua is mustajab. He's mustajab al-da'wah. Istijabat al-dua is there. Why does he wait for a particular time? And the reason is this, that there's specific times that Allah has created that's beneficial, that gives the risk that's meant to come to you in its entirety. Remember, risk isn't just material, it's also spiritual. And the biggest risk that anybody can have is spiritual peace. Inner peace, happiness, in which the whole world is trying to find it. Some people try and find it in power. And again, you see a miserable end to their life. Some people try and find it in wealth. And again, by the end of it, they're not satisfied, they're not happy. There's certain awqat. In fact, let me give you a tradition, now that we're on this. Yeah, they say that the Zahra alayhi salam went to the Prophet once, and the Prophet advised her. He said that on a Friday, when you see that the sun is going down, until it goes down completely, until it disappears completely, that is the best time of dua. Tradition says that she would wait, and one of her servants would say to her, and again, we use the term servant, they weren't servants, they were people she was training. Essentially, they were her novices. She was the master, they were novices, she was training them. So one of her novices turns around and says that, look, it's time now, and she would be there on the musalla praying. So look, if nothing, just remember this. The last 1/3 of the night before Fajr is a time of istijabat of dua. It's very important to remember these things. Sometimes people require prayer. It's like what Allama Majlisi's father said. Had it not been for that last moments before Fajr that I did dua, my son wouldn't be my son. My son wouldn't have compiled this effectively 110 volumes of the Bihar, which is impossible in those days. You go back 400 years ago. Imagine compiling so many traditions. Imagine the speed that he was doing it. Imagine gathering all of those traditions together. If I was to say to you today, go and write hundreds of thousands of traditions, how long will that take you? Just writing it by hand. Going to a library to write it is painstaking. Now imagine trying to find books from across the Islamic empire, gathering those books, gathering those hadith, and then writing them all up. That's how somebody like Allama Majlisi becomes Allama Majlisi. There's a special lutf there, there's a special dua there. So look, remember these things. There are certain times. This is why you find the Qudama, for example, they wouldn't start an a'mal before the first Thursday of a month. They would wait specifically 10 days after, for example, to start an amal, right? Somebody has a haja, they want to do an amal. What do? They wait for specific awqat, specific timings, be it in the month. Give you an example. For example, when they say this, you've heard this before, you've seen this before, it's on your calendars. Qamar dar akrab. What does that mean? Why do people wait for specific times? Why don't people get married on that day, for example? Is there anything halal or haram? No. There's nothing halal or haram, but it's the way the system works. It's the way creation works. And within all of our traditions, we have it. Look at the Hindus today. Many of them wouldn't get married without bringing two charts together, kundli together, reading it, seeing how we'd call it zaicha, they would call it kundli. But the fact of the matter is this. That's one thing. Go to within Jewish mysticism and see. Look at their reliance on astrology, for example. And so forth, different times, different awqat, the fact that you pray at different times, the fact that most of your a'mal is meant to be done in the first hour after Fajr, sorry. For many of the a'mal to be effective, for example, it isn't exactly Fajr time. Specific a'mals have a specific shart that it has to be Fajr time, but for all of the other a'mal, the first hour after Fajr, meaning what? When Fajr becomes qadha, the first hour of the day that's when people who are masters of amaliyat are up and doing amal on that. They may go to sleep after that, but you may find that they will be up at that time. This is why, for example, Ayatul Khui doesn't start his day at Fajr. In fact, his Shari'i calculations actually begins on the first hour after Fajr. So it doesn't start at Fajr. So for example, when you're working out the timings for midnight, you may notice Ayatollah Sistani's timing is before 45 minutes or 40 minutes before Ayatollah Khui's. Ayatollah Khui's time would be much later. It's because of the fact that his daytime is different. His daytime ends at Fajr, effectively. First hour of Fajr, first after Fajr symbolizes the first day for him, whereas Ayatollah Sistani's calculation begins at the time of Fajr. This is why sometimes with Ayatollah Khui, it's very simple. If Dhuhr time is at 1 o'clock, you flip it around, Fajr would be at 1 o'clock. Sorry, midnight would be at 1 o'clock, where you can start reciting Salatul Layl. Ayatollah Sistani, nevertheless, is always 40 minutes, 43 minutes, and that's the same with many of the Marajid beforehand. These are technical points. If you speak to those people who are into amaliyat, amilin, or you speak to dhakirin, or people who are into mysticism, they'll tell you actually Ayatollah Khui had it spot on. Not to say that the rest of the Maraji are not. Obviously, this is his ijtihad. Ijtihad doesn't go on amaliyat. But the fact of the matter is that for all of those people, all of those spiritual wayfarers, it makes sense to them that the first hour after Fajr is the first hour of the day. But anyhow, we're going into technical discussion. The point of me raising this is the month of Safar. And I wanted to take at least the first 10 minutes. Well, I wanted to take 5 minutes, but let's say the first 10 minutes just to explain these points. This is important because nobody explains these things anymore, especially to our children. It's unexplained, People ask, why isn't our dua being accepted? Why is it delayed? Actually, there's sharait and shurut for everything. You can't just do an amal like that and think that it's going to happen without the various prerequisites that take place. People recite Ziyarat Ashura, for example. Ziyarat Ashura is not for everything. Right? It's not a ziyarah of hajat. Just remember that. Ziyarat Ashura is good for many things, but not for everything. At the same time, what's the best time to recite Ziyarat Ashura? What about if you're not reciting the 100 salawats and the 100 lans? What is the effectiveness of the 100 la'ans, 100 salawat? What is the effectiveness when you recite dua al-qama after that? And how fruitful is it there? See, there's so many different one would say, principles, qaids, conditions and criteria. We don't have time to go into it. Of course, it's important for us to recite Ziyarat Ashura every day. And the reason being is that it enhances our connection to Sayyid al-Shuhada. But one needs to recite, when you get to one particular level, you recite it for the sake of the love of Imam Hussain, not for any haja. But anyhow, this discussion we can have another time. This was just to explain to some of our children, some of our youth, that look, timing means a lot. And even within your daily life, there's a time when you should get married. There's a time for education, though education is from cradle to grave. But you may notice many of our maraja have reached a particular peak by the age of 30, 33, 35, maximum 40. After that is about maintaining what they have. So there are particular times, God's given you particular times. And for this reason, you see a decline in your own self. The older you begin to get, your memory begins to go. Your physical power begins to diminish. That arrogance that you had because you were good looking when you were younger, it's not there anymore. The hair that you had on your head, which was completely full, when it starts falling off, you're in the shower, you see a lot of that fall, for men that is specifically. There's a time for everything. And time is going to take you on. And time is going to erode you. And that time will come when you'll perish. The only people today who are alive, especially within our communities, people who really move us, are those people who are attached to Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. You've done a khidmah, done a service. You've done something. You're still alive today. You know, for every time I've come to New Jersey, some of the youth have always talked about Sache Bhai. Some of them weren't even old enough. In fact, some of them weren't even alive when he passed away. Some of them weren't even old enough to have listened to him and comprehended it. But today, people talk about Sache Bhai. Why? Why don't you talk about anybody else for it? It's very simple, because he laid a debt for us. In fact, we're indebted to him because he was a pillar of Azadari. He was sincere. He did something. He's still alive today. You go back a couple of weeks ago, Allama Talib Johari passed away. Despite lockdown, you had huge crowds coming in. People are still talking about his life. Okay, he's just passed away recently. Let's go even further than that. Rashid Turabi, Allama Rashid Turabi. Now, definitely half of the people listening now probably wouldn't have been alive when he was alive. Now you're going back to the early 70s. Look at the elders, they remember that, but youngsters still today have translated his lectures, still listen to his lectures, still know him by name. Why? If I was to say to you a name of a marja, for example, in the 70s, let's say, for example, Hashim Amali, how many people would know? No one. If I was to say Hashim Amali, who's his children today, who would know? Then no one would know, even though some of them are in very prominent positions. Ayatullah, Mujtahid, Marja of his time. And it's not belittling anyone. But remember one thing, there's a natural reaction, action to a reaction. Today in the Arab world, when you say Sheikh Wa'ili, he wasn't a marja, but everybody knows him. Why? Because he was a mimbari. There have been many mujtahids come and gone. In the Arab world, if you say Sheikh Wa'ili, people know him better than maybe, for example, Abu Ala Sabzawari was a marja. He's a marja, he's a mystic. But remember, when a person does service for Imam Hussain, not that they didn't do, they did service for the deen, no doubt about that. But there has to be a reaction. Allah has to elevate certain people who are right in the midst of Azadari. When you're in the midst of Azadari, when you're there serving, when you're reciting from the minbar, when you're doing Masaib, when you're, for example, reciting Noha, Marsiya, these are culture. Look, to give you an example, Miranis. The vast majority of you listening are from the subcontinent. Miranis died over 100 years ago. You know, the oldest picture you'll find from the 19th century of Miranis, which is still there, where he was in Lucknow giving or reciting one of his poems. There's one picture in black and white, which is there of Miranis. Let me ask you a question. Miranis, it's been much over 100. There's none of us who were alive in his time. more than 100 years. The only thing you see is a picture of him, a cartoon, not a cartoon picture as such, but a picture of him with his mustache. But today people still remember, still recite. Why is that? What makes him different? Why do people recite more Miranis than they do, let's say, for example, Nasr al-Millat? Very simply, because his entire life was waqf for Imam Hussain, not that the other ulama's life wasn't waqf for Imam Hussain. The fact was that he was on the front line. He was the face of Azadari. That's what I'm trying to say. When a person becomes the face of Azadari, Allah has to make sure that they live on. And the reason why is because the baqa of this religion was through Imam Hussain. In Akhir al-Zaman, the savior of this religion is Imam Hussain. And for those people who have attached themselves, for those people who recite Marsiya, Noha, Mata, Majlis, whatever it may be, Ziyarah, people still remember. Why? Because of this entire atmosphere of Azah. What am I trying to say effectively? Effectively is this: attach yourself to the Azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada and you see you live forever. Otherwise you find people come and they go. Those people who are fixed onto the Azah, they live forever. Whether you agree with them or disagree with them, people remember them even after their death. So let me ask you a question. What is the maqsad of Imam Hussain? What is the mission of Imam Hussain? What does it entail? Is the mission of Imam Hussain basically just to go and give his life? As people say, oh, he went to give his life against oppression. Is that the only reason? Or is there something far bigger than that? What about the other Imams? Wasn't the fourth Imam oppressed? Why didn't he stand up in the way Imam Hussain did? Wasn't the fifth Imam oppressed? Why didn't he stand up? Sixth Imam, wasn't he oppressed? Seventh Imam, eighth Imam? You could go all the way down, work from up to bottom. Hussain is exceptional. And when you come to this hadith of the Imam, sixth Imam alayhi salam, when he talks about the different ships, what is Safinatul Hussain? It's the fastest and it's the widest, most encompassing. Why? Because it sails on a high amount of love and compassion. Therefore, Imam Hussain appeals to everyone. The reward for crying over Imam Hussain is a reward not just for Muslims, but anyone who cries over Imam Hussain. Maqsad of Imam Hussain is far greater. What is the maqsad of Imam Hussain? Imam Hussain didn't go out to fight, by the way. In Sunni tradition, it says that Imam Hussain says, I'll go to India if I have to. To take your women and children means that you're not there to fight. Was he, as they say, an activist? No. Is he a politician? No. What is Imam Hussain effectively doing? Imam Hussain was teaching us actually Tawheed. What is Tawheed? Negation, affirmation. Where do you find this? Tabarra and Tawalla. This is why Ziyarat Ashura, you can see by the very imprint of Ziyarat Ashura that it's Hadith Qudsi, because it's negation. First of all, you have to purify your heart by saying Allahumma ana wala zalim and zalim haqqa Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Only then can you move on to Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. The 100 la'ans and the salawats that you give, the purpose is what? To remove any negativity from your heart, to basically and actively remove those negative characteristics. And then after that, say salam. If you were to give salam without removing those negative attributes, then what happens? It's like trying to sow on or plow on a field which is already barren, it's dirty. It's not going to produce the best of fruit. Same way with the heart. Why do you think that when you start off, you're the only people whose tawheed begins with negation? La ilaha illallah. Negation of masiwallah. Destruction of negation, destruction, whatever you may call it, destruction of the idols from your heart. Ilaha illallah. First of all, you negate everything, and then after that, then you affirm. Very same way, what did Imam Hussain do? He didn't fight. He says, I'm not going to give somebody, myself, somebody like me, give allegiance to somebody like him. What did he do? Tabarra. What is tabarra? Distance himself. Negated the characteristics. But at the same time, he wasn't there to fight. There's only two people in the entire history of Islam, of the Imams who have fought. One is Amir al-Mu'mineen. The only reason he fought would be because for the 4.5 years he was Khalifa, his responsibility as a governor, as a leader, as a khalif, political responsibility was to keep the peace of the land. So therefore, when you found that 3 battles took place, from Jamal to Safin to Naharawan, it became incumbent upon him to protect. The other person who fought was Imam Hussain. 6 months he was Khalifa. But if you're not Khalifa, if you haven't the responsibility of the Ummah, then what do? You sit down. The jihad of Ahlul Bayt. What is jihad basically? Jihad comes from juhad, it means to struggle. In Shiism, jihad is jihad ilmi. It means what? Intellectual jihad. And that's the best form. When you found 1,000 years ago for example, in Egypt or North Africa, or in the Levant, or in Iraq, when Jews, Christians, and Muslims sat together to do jihad ilmi, would you think they took their swords out and started fighting? That wasn't the case. The case was they were struggling and they were trying, and they were working. Remember, jihad, ijtihad comes from jihad, by the way, for those people who may not know. Juhad, jihad, ijtihad. When a mujtahid, what is he doing? He's doing jihad on the Quran and Hadith to be able to extract some meaning out of it, basically. So really, effectively, what are you doing? This is why when people talk about fighting, that's really not the way of the Imams. The way of the Imams is what? The highest level. What does the Prophet after the Battle of Badr congratulates them after the finishing of the battle and says, by the way, there's a greater jihad. What is that? Against yourself. What does that mean? Fight your ego. What does your ego say? My ego says I should take $50 from that person, but I know that person is needy, so let me leave it with him. That is jihad, basically. Jihad means this. Somebody shouts at you, and you know it's a waste of time to reply, you stay quiet. That's jihad. You fought against your nafs. Jihad is this. A woman is crossing the road. She can't cross the road. Her bags are too heavy. You have 5 minutes to get somewhere else, but you think, okay, fine, let me help her. That helping her, that's jihad. Somebody's lonely. Somebody's homeless. You give them a home. That's jihad. Today, the perception is negative in the media because we haven't, as Muslims, gone and explained what it means. Actually, something, if you look at it in its intrinsic nature, is something positive. Why is it positive? Because it means to help people. Somebody's hungry, to feed them. That's a jihad. Positively meaning what? Positively meaning to become selfless from becoming selfish. Basically, in your character is what true juhad would mean, struggling would mean. So one needs to bear that in mind. What was jihad ilmi? Jihad ilmi basically is this, the refinement of knowledge. Today, the Western world owes a great debt to Islam. Why is that? Because from algorithms to your sewage systems to all sorts of technological advancement wouldn't have happened. You have to remember, right? Europe was in the Dark Ages. And perhaps the history of North America is not, okay, it's very old in terms of its indigenous population, but in terms of its modern population, it's not very old. All of America, North America goes back to Europe in some shape, form or another. Let's go back 250, 300 years ago. Let's go back 400 years ago. Let's go back to the time of the Enlightenment. Look at the research on the Enlightenment. It just so happens that some of the books on my site at the moment are based upon people like Newton. Who were they? They were all occultists, right? What were they looking at? They were looking at Islamic texts which were translated, both in the metaphysical sense and the physical sense. Most of the ideas that have come forward, the foundations were laid. And these are not scholars who are Muslim, actually. They're all Christian scholars, or they're all secular scholars with Western names. And what was their purpose? Their purpose was this, and this wasn't going to be my topic, but I'm raising this particular issue for this reason. Is that because of the jihad ilmi of the Imams, today we have a world of technology. 2 places, Islamic literature, art, translation of Greek philosophy, interpretation of Greek philosophy came through. You know what that was? One is a place called Venice. If you've never been, it's a beautiful place, but in some it smells a little bit. However, Venice is one port, the other one's Andalusia. That entire area, some of the greatest Sunni scholars, Maliki scholars and Sunni scholars, theologians actually, came from Andalusia. North Africa, for example, from Spain. There was a place where Christianity, Islam, Judaism came together, at least on an intellectual plane, to help one another. This helping of one another would be seen as jihad ilmi. But anyhow, Rather than staring out this discussion too much, if you look at the maqsad of Imam Hussain, what is the maqsad of Imam Hussain? Maqsad of Imam Hussain is to enlighten the people, enlighten the hearts. When Imam Hussain moves, he's not here to fight. By the time he gets to Karbala, what is he doing? In the true sense of the word, inqilab goes to qalb. Qalb is a rotation of the heart. Effectively, the only way Islam survived, and so the thing is, anything by the sword doesn't survive. Anything through violence and force doesn't survive. What survives is the way of the heart. To change the heart of the people is the most important thing. Now, before you can change, this is Imam Hussein's movement was the movement of the heart. His sincerity is so powerful that today each one of us are benefiting. All of this that I've said in the last 20 minutes or 30 minutes was meant to be summed up in 30 seconds. The reason is this. Now let's move on to the bulk of what I wanted to say. I'm not going to take too much time. I'll just go into the bulk of what I wanted to say. We have a responsibility as the guardians of Azhar. Okay, 12th Imam is the Asl, Sahib Azhar. It's his inheritance. He's the master. But we have a responsibility as well. In the way that Imam Hussain changed hearts, we have a responsibility to change hearts of the people. In the way that your ancestors did. Take out 10 days, for example. Those of you who are from India, go to India for 10 days of Muharram. If you don't see hundreds of Hindus or Sikhs or other people, Parsis, other denominations of people coming to your Majlis, then come back again to the West. You'll see it though. For every single town, city you go to in India, go to Srinagar and see. What are you going to find there? Same thing. There's going to be somebody from another faith. Why is that? Because your ancestors were guardians in the sense that they spread the message to others. But how does one spread the message to others? First stage is this. As we've been going on for the last 3 nights, it's important to change your worldview. It's important to change your view of Allah. Remember one thing. Today we get very despondent. In times of bala, in times of trial and tribulation, we become very despondent. What did we say yesterday? We said one of the most important things that one can do is have husn al-dhan for Allah. Right? Remember what the story that we narrated of Nadir Shah. If you perceive Allah as positive, as the 8th Imam alayhi salam has said, so the way that you see Allah, perceive Allah, if you feel that Allah is merciful, He's going to be merciful to you. It's your perception. Look, let me give you 5 things. And those 5 things is enough to change your life and to change my own life. Look, first thing is this. You believe God is all-knowing. I believe you. God's all-knowing over all of creation. So the second thing is this. He also has power. He also has power over all of creation, and He possesses all of creation. Right? 3 things. 5 things I'm going to give. If you can, Allah has so many names. Joshna Kabir has 1,000 names, plus in other du'as and so forth. I'm saying 5 names. Understand 5 names, and you'll understand how to overcome many difficulties. Allah is all knowledgeable over all things, and He possesses all things, and He has power over all things. Right? That's decided. So there's nothing outside of His scope. There's nothing outside of His hand. Allah's hand is above all of other hands, right? Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. Take it a step further than that. You also know Allah's Rahman. He's merciful. Unlike me and you, when somebody wrongs us, we hold a grudge. Allah doesn't hold a grudge. You can be a sinner, but when you turn to Allah, Allah will forgive you and Allah will give you. Why is that? Because Allah doesn't hold a grudge. You and I hold a grudge. Allah doesn't hold a grudge. Take it a step further. What else is Allah? Allah is Jawad. You know what that means? That means He doesn't have no in His dictionary. He's not bakhil, as they say. He's not stingy. He gives, and He gives unconditionally. If you remember those things, let's say now something doesn't happen in your life. It's not because Allah doesn't have the power to give, and it's not the fact that Allah is stingy. It's genuinely the fact that it's not your time yet. So what does the tradition say? Keep on knocking, not to give up. Keep on knocking on the door, awaiting that time where situation changes. There are multiple reasons why dua may not be accepted. I want you to go and look at some of the reasons why. How do we find these reasons? Open up the books of dua. Who is it? Imam Sajjad. Where? Dua Makaram al-Akhlaq. In the Dua Makaram al-Akhlaq, what does your Imam say? What is your Imam saying? The Imam says, Allah, give me wealth, which means that it's not a bad thing to have money. You know, sometimes we feel very kind of pessimistic about this. We feel very kind of apologetic. Oh my God, I've got money, then maybe I'm not a good human being. No, it's actually a very good thing. You can do many good things with money. But what does the Imam say? Give me wealth, but remove the arrogance that goes with wealth. Sometimes Allah doesn't give you wealth because He knows you could become arrogant. And sometimes He tests you with wealth to see how arrogant you become. Namrud and Pharaoh are examples. Take it a step further. Allah, make me religious. Or, for example, give me respect in the community. So what does He say here? He says that increase my respect in the heart of others, but increase my own status in my own heart, so that I don't become arrogant effectively. Only an Imam can do dua like that. Look again and see, make me religious. Sometimes Allah doesn't make a person religious. Why? Because He knows if a person was to become religious, it's possible they may have ujub. They may be arrogant, they may be haughty, they may be of such nature that's not soft, that's not compassionate. And you find sometimes when it comes to people of religion, some of the most arrogant people you find there because they feel that they're the best. And perhaps they are the best. But for you to feel that and not look at your deficiencies means that it's counterproductive. Your entire worship is to zero. So then what then Allah will then do? Put bala on you. Why? Inqisar, break you and humble you. So look, we have all of these things. Look at the side effects. Think about it and think, why didn't Allah give me this? I wanted that Ferrari, He didn't give it to me. Well, had I got the Ferrari, possible I could have become extremely arrogant. Possible I could have broken a law. Possible I could have done something haram. Possible I could have picked up people I shouldn't be picking up. It could be multiple different things. And so then what happens? He doesn't give it to you. Now, if you were to pray that Allah remove all of those things, perhaps even then He wouldn't have given it to you. Why? Because you have the money, but perhaps that money could have been invested in something more wiser. Either to generate more income for you so that you can help other people, or perhaps it wasn't just good. There's multiple reasons. So you've got to do dua, you've got to pray. We've got to be happy. Look, I'm going to give you 3 examples. I know that time is fast moving away. I'm going to give you 3 examples, and that's it. You know, the person comes to the 8th Imam alayhi salam. I want you to listen to this carefully, right? Because it's something that resonated with me when I was also looking at this tradition. Somebody came to the 8th Imam, they said, Mawla, I don't have enough food. I don't have enough food to feed myself. My family doesn't have enough food to feed themselves. What should I do? So the Imam gave a branch of grapes to him. You know, you've got this, you go to the shop, you find where you get this bunch of grapes. And so he breaks a piece off and he gives it to him. So that person is saying, Mawla, I'm hungry, my family's hungry. What is this branch of a grape? At that moment in time, one of the Shias of the Imam walked in. And as the Shias of the Imam walked in, the Shias of the Imam says, Mawla, you know, my heart was feeling lonely and I wanted to see you. I was missing you. And so I've come to see you. So the Imam takes the grape, one grape, and he says, take this grape. And the guy looks up and goes, thank you, Imam, but I just came to see you. You're very merciful for having given me this, but you know, it's enough for me to be in your presence. Imam breaks off the entire branch of the grapes. He says, take this. He says, Mawla, you know, this isn't necessary. I'm really grateful that you've given it. There's enough barakah in the one grape. I could have taken it, put it into water, shared it with my family. Imam gives him the whole container of grapes. He says, take the whole lot. He says, Mawla, I've just come to see you. I wanted to see you. I wanted to spend time with you. I wanted to socialize with you. I didn't want to take too much of your time either. I wanted to be in your presence, but you're very kind and you're very merciful. Imam says, bring me that pen and paper. Brings the pen and paper and he begins to write. He gave him an entire, you could say, an entire garden of grapes, which was situated in Iran. He says, take the whole lot, take it. And as this man takes it, kisses it, walks out, this other guy is sitting there, says, Mawla, I was the one who was poor. My family doesn't have anything to eat. Why'd you give him everything? What does the Imam say? Conclusively, the Imam says this. Doesn't Allah say in the Quran that those people who are thankful, we give them more? Your thankfulness stops the adhab coming on you. So be thankful, be grateful for everything that you have, and you'll see Allah will increase it and increase. This is the sunnah of Allah. He says, because this is the sunnah of Allah, I was applying the same thing to my servants, to my Shias. One story. If you want to become rich, truly want to, let's look at it purely on a business level. Forget ma'rifah irfan. You want to become rich? Even if you get $1, thank Allah for it. And if you can give a portion of that dollar completely without wanting anything back to somebody else, unconditionally sharing what you have without wanting anything back, okay, he gives something back, that's his akhlaq or her akhlaq. Then you see that there's an acceleration of you gaining that wealth, accumulation of that wealth. You'll see it starts multiplying, manifesting. So try that first thing. First story. Second story. Man comes to Imam Hadi alayhi salam and he had a really bad time. One of his Shia. His name of Abu Hashim. A really bad time. And he's coming to the Imam and he wants to complain. Say, look how bad it is. What's happening? What's not happening? So at that moment, when he comes to Imam Hadi looks at his face. Without him saying anything, he says, have you come to me to thank me for all of the ni'mah of Allah? Abu Hashim has thought to himself, no, Imam's going to teach me a lesson here, better not say anything and sit down. He says, Abu Hashim, you're going to thank Allah for your memory, for example? The fact that it holds you, keeps you. You're going to thank Allah for your body being salim. You're thanking Allah, for example, Iman, the faith that you have that will stop your flesh from burning in the fire. Basically, fire becomes haram on you because of your Iman. Is that what you're here to thank Allah about? Is that what you've come to me to thank Allah about? One by one, he starts listing all of the ni'mats of Allah that Allah has given. And at that moment, then he discloses, he says, look, don't come and complain. Learn to thank God. Quran says, you couldn't even count the amount of bounties that God's given you. So let's sit down, let's count it. What has Allah given you? Eyes to see, ears to hear, a tongue, a body, a roof over your head, good children, for example, good wife, parents, the ability to meet your relatives, etc. How many can you list? 20, 30, 50? But then after that, you can't list anymore. But Allah is saying it's so many that we've given, you can't even count it. Why is it that after 50, maybe you run out? It's because to appreciate ni'mah, to understand it, you need an eye to see it with. And where does that begin? When you open up the book of dua. So the final thing I'm going to say is really this. Imam Musa ibn Jafar, right? Bab al-Hawa'ij. Especially for those people who are sick. You take the wasila of Bab al-Hawa'ij, who is Imam Musa ibn Jafar alayhi salam. Going up, open up Mafatih al-Jinan. There's a dua in there known as Joshn al-Saghir. You've heard of Joshn al-Kabir. It just so happens that you're awake on the night of Qadr, so you end up reading it, but otherwise it's put away for the next 12 months. But now go to Joshn al-Kabir, much smaller. Joshn al-Kabir is there for protection as well, right? So if a person is surrounded by their enemies and they know that there's going to be a problem, you're meant to recite Joshn al-Saghir. And there's many fadail of Joshn al-Saghir we don't have time to go into. I have about 4 minutes to wrap up. So if you open up Joshn al-Saghir, what you see is that when the Imam takes nisbah, when the Imam does dua, what does he say? he looks at those people who are worse off, and then he thanks Allah. For example, thank God that I'm close to my relatives. Some people are much further away from them. Maybe it's years since the last they saw their parents. The fact that you're free and you're not in prison, that again is a ni'mah. And he begins to list one by one all of the ni'mah that Allah has given us. This is why there's 3 types of people on earth who worship Allah. The first type is they know Allah is Khaliq, but they deny the rububiyyah of Allah. What does a Rabb mean, basically? Rabb is a sustainer, somebody who nurtures you. Why does it say in the Quran, Rabbi irhamhuma kama rabbayani saghira? What is your mother, effectively? When you're a child, your mother is a Rabb for you because she nurtures you, right? One of the characteristics of a Rabb is a person who nurtures. Now, Allah is Rabbul Arbab. But without going into other issues, which then I'll have to try and explain then, and go into, which will take much longer to explain if we go into the whole concept of a Rabb. But let's look at it just on the literal sense. A Rabb is a person who's somebody who nurtures. They believe that Allah is Khaliq, but they don't see Allah as the Lord, as the nurturer, as the governor, as somebody who's put principles forward. You see some people, they say, well, we believe in a God, but we don't want to be muqayyad in the rules and the laws of Sharia, for example. Meaning what? Meaning we don't want to pray, we don't want to fast, we want to continue to do haram things, or that which is perceived as haram. Your religion is backward. Quran is the yes, but it's for a different time, as draconian and so forth. What does that mean? You believe in Allah as Khaliq, but you don't see him as a Rabb. That in itself is a deficiency. But there's some people who believe in Allah as Khaliq, and they believe in Allah as a Rabb. But then what happens? When a problem befalls, you've seen it yourself. I've seen it myself. Somebody saying, Allah, in a hospital, Allah, if you don't cure my son, let's say, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop today praying and fasting. They recognize that Allah is Khaliq. They recognize Allah is Rabb. They recognize there's a lordship of God there. What does shaitan do? Khalaqtani min nar, right? What does he say? I'm made out of fire. That guy's made out of tin. I'm not going to bow down. Though he knows, what does he address Allah by? Rabb, Allah, Khaliq, etc. When you get to that stage, then what happens? You have some people to say that if I can't rationally philosophize why I'm doing something in Islam, I'm not going to do it. There's thousands of things out there that we don't know why we do. Why do you pray 2 units of prayers at Fajr time, 3 at Maghrib time? Why is your prayer qasr for? And yes, we've got answers to a lot of these things, but mutlaqan, we don't have answers to everything. You know what effectively you're saying to Allah? You're saying to Allah, my aql is Lord. My Allah is my aql. We forget as human beings that He's the Lord and we're the servants. We want to be the Lord and we want Allah to be our servant, that whatever we want, every small desire of ours, Allah fulfills. Sometimes one has to remember that place in the universe. We may be Lord over creation if a person gets to the level of Insani Kamil. But the better they get, then you become, only then do you become a true servant of Allah. And yes, Wilayat al-Taqwini does mean that you have power over all of creation and everything that you want. But to get to that stage, you have to truly understand Ubudiyya, worship. But anyhow, this discussion, I want to bring it very quickly together. There was a lot I wanted to say, and honestly, I haven't even touched what I wanted to touch. You can imagine 45 minutes on something that I wanted to spend 10 minutes on, but it was important that we expand on this. One thing I'm going to say is this. But don't lose hope in Allah. Don't lose hope in the fact that your Lord is merciful. When your Lord is Jawad, meaning He gives infinitely without wanting anything back. When your Lord is compassionate and He holds no grudges, then put your hope and faith in Allah. And similarly, put your hope in your Imam. Why? Your Imam has 3 qualities. 3 qualities which are not found in anybody else. Do you know what those 3 qualities are? He has more knowledge than you. He's alim, mansus. His nas, because of being mansus min Allah, he has knowledge. And the second thing is this: he's infallible. So a person who's infallible and has complete knowledge is not going to make a mistake. When they advise you on something, that advice is correct. Let's say, for example, you've got X amount of money. Why do you go to a hedge fund for? Why do you go to those people running a hedge fund? Because they have expertise in knowing how to multiply your money. They have knowledge of that. But they're not merciful. They're knowledgeable is contractual. But what is the Imam? Imam is ma'asum. He doesn't make a mistake. Imam is all knowledgeable. Therefore, whatever he advises you is correct. But the third thing is this: Imam is more merciful because he's the warith of Rahmatul Alameen. If your mother loves you and your parents love you and they want to make sure that you succeed in life, your Imam has more love than they do. When a person like that says to do something, then go and do it. Why? Because other than benefit, there is no other thing there for us. I'm going to conclude on that. But before I do, there are many people who have asked for dua. Though I feel that I'm just looking into a box and there's no one here, maybe one or two people are listening. So somebody now and again messages in the daytime from New Jersey to say, or from Boston, or from DC, or Detroit, or Chicago, or Houston, or Orlando. These are the places really where you get the messages from, to say that we were listening to your lecture. Please do dua for us. So I say to you, you do dua for me as well. I'll do dua for you. But I'm going to mention something. Perhaps it'll soften our hearts. And the maqsad of azaa is to do, really to commemorate, to cry. Look, when Astaana-e-Zehra comes, there's a particular tradition that some ulama recite, including myself. What is that? They say when Harun Rashid gave the order to burn down the house of the Imam alayhi salam, they say your sixth Imam, when the house was burning, he came, he sat in the sahan, and he began to cry. Not moving forward, one of his khadims comes to him and says to him, Mawla, why didn't you move forward for? Why are you sitting here for? He says, when I saw my house burning, he says, I was alive, but I saw my daughters running from one end of the house to the other end of the house. I was thinking, I'm alive and my daughters are panicking and running like this. Is it I was thinking on that night, Astaana-e-Zehra, how Imam Sajjad must have been feeling. There was no father left. And you saw women running from one end of the maqtal to the other end of the maqtal. In this way, these are the nights of Sakina. Sakina herself is Bab al-Hawaj. This is what they say. They say that, look, when a dua is not being fulfilled, take 3 wasilas. Ask Abul Fadl Abbas for the sake of the chadar of Zainab. They say, ask Abul Fadl Abbas for the earrings of Sakina. They say, ask Abul Fadl Abbas for the sake of his mother al-Baneen. Look, if we only have one night to pray, then we pray. One day Imam Sajjad was sitting there in Medina. He was crying. A person comes up to Mawla, he says, Mawla, why are you crying for? He says, oh person, I miss Sakina. He says, what do you miss about her? He said, when they chained me, the chains were going into my neck, spikes were in my neck, my arms and my feet were chained, they would put me under the sun. When the sun used to burn my chains and it used to burn my skin, I used to say, said that my sister was thirsty. Small as she was, she walked towards me with some water and she poured it over my chains. When I asked her, Sakina, you're thirsty, why didn't you drink it? She says, brother, I can't see you in pain. You seen how ma'soom children are? Have you seen those children who are selfless. Fine, when children are growing up, sometimes they're selfish, sometimes they're selfless. But when you find a selfless child, as masoom, as small as they are, they come running and they give their own thing to somebody. They come and help someone. Imagine that. Imam Sajjad begins to cry again. He says, "What are you crying for?" He says, "I miss my Sakina." "What else do you miss about her?" He says, "One day I was sitting there, my feet were stretched." Now, Imam never would stretch his feet. So Sakina comes and she says, "Brother, I've never seen you sit like this with your feet stretched. Why have you got your feet stretched for?" He says, "Sakina, because my feet are hurting. Shimmer makes me walk over thorny bushes." He says that my feet are blistered. I have blisters on my feet. Those thorns go into my blisters, it hurts me. When he was saying, they say Sakina walked forward next to his feet. With a small hand, she starts pulling out as best as she could some of those thorns which was in his feet. Imam begins to cry. He says, "What could I have done when Shimmer made Sakina walk over thorny bushes? When she said, my arms were tied behind my back. I didn't have the ability to pull those thorns out." Imagine what the Imam is feeling. Look, let me give you a story. I remember when we went to say the Ruqayya, when you go to the shrine of Bibi Sakina, we were sitting there one day. I saw a young boy, maybe 5 years old, had a teddy bear in his hand. When his father wasn't looking, he walked up to the shrine of Bibi Sakina and he placed the teddy bear next to the zari and he walked back. Father saw. He looks up and he says, "Son, why did you do that?" The reply was, "Father, I have you. This girl's very lonely." Imagine how lonely she was. This is why they say, "Ghareebun yabki ghareeb." Only a person lonely cries for another person lonely. How lonely was she? When the head of Imam Hussain was brought to Bibi Sakina, you know what she says? She says, "Father, I'm not going to complain that Shimmer slapped me. I heard that my grandmother was also slapped on the face." Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. May Allah accept our worship in these nights. Raise the maqamat of our deceased. Guide us on this pathway of wilayah. Fulfill our hajat. Forgive our sins and hasten the zuhur of the Imam. Matam Hussain.
क्या अंधेरा है फुपी, शम्मा मंगवाए वरना मैं नहीं जीने की। क्या अंधेरा है फुपी, क्या अंधेरा है फुपी, अपने सीने से लगा लो, मैं तुम्हारे सदके गोद में ले लो मुझे, गोद में ले लो मुझे, वरना पछताओगी, जिंदा न रहूंगी मैं कभी। क्या अंधेरा है फुपी, آج کی شب کو بھی کیا بابا نہیں آئیں گے، مجھ کو تڑپائیں گے، ارے مجھ کو تڑپائیں گے، ان کے سینے پہ اگر سوتی تو نیند آ جاتی، کیا اندھیرا ہے پھوپھی، اور بابا آ جاتے تو پھر شعور کو ہوتا معلوم، ارے کون ہے یہ معصوم، کون ہے یہ معصوم، کیا سمجھ کر مجھے یوں گھڑکیاں دیتا ہے شقی، کیا اندھیرا ہے پھوپھی، اور پانی لانے کو کہاں روٹھ گئے مجھ سے چچا، اور آپ ہی سوچیں ذرا، آپ ہی سوچیں ذرا، ہوتے امو تو میں اس طرح تماچے کھاتی، کیا اندھیرا ہے پھوپھی، کیا اندھیرا ہے پھوپھی، اور بعد میرے جو یہاں ہے پدر کا ان سے یہ فرمانا، ان سے یہ فرمانا، ارے مر گئی گھٹ کے اندھیرے میں تمہاری بیٹی، کیا اندھیرا ہے پھوپھی، کیا اندھیرا ہے پھوپھی، قید خانے میں سکینہ یہ بیان کرتی تھی، کیا اندھیرا ہے پھوپھی، اور شمع منگوائی ہے ورنہ میں نہیں جینے کی، کیا اندھیرا ہے پھوپھی، حسین 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 آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، منہ کہاں منہ کہاں کہ ہم ہیں ابھی پیاسے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، اور پھٹتا ہے جگر پیاس یہ لے گی میری جان، اور پھٹتا ہے جگر پیاس یہ لے گی میری جان، اور بچ بھی گئی شمر کے دلوں کی سزا سے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، اور بے شیر کے ہوں تو پہ نہیں پیاس کا شکوہ، بے شیر کے ہوں تو پہ نہیں پیاس کا شکوہ، اور تر کر دیا دان گلا تیر جفا سے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، اور جو رن کو گیا رن سے کہاں یا پلٹ کر، جو رن کو گیا رن سے کہاں یا پلٹ کر، اور دیتی ہے پھوپھی جان مجھے یوں ہی دلا سے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، اور سنتی ہوں یتیموں کی دعا رد نہیں ہوتی، اور سنتی ہوں یتیموں کی دعا رد نہیں ہوتی، اور یارا مجھے ملوا دے پھر ایک بار چچا سے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے، اور ماں بہن کھلے سر ہیں لہو روتی ہیں آنکھیں، ماں بہن کھلے سر ہیں لہو روتی ہیں آنکھیں، اور اٹھتا نہیں بھائی کا میرے سر ہے حیا سے، آتی ہے سکی سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے آتی ہے سکینہ کی صدا کرب و بلا سے اور کہاں کہ ہوں ہے ابھی پیاسے حسین حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا سجاد سکینہ کو سجاد سکینہ کو مرنے سے بچا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا پانی نہیں مانگوں گی بچوں کو سنبھالوں گی ان چھوٹے سے ہاتھوں سے تیرے کانٹے نکالوں گی ایک بار سکینہ کو ایک بار سکینہ کو تو پاس بولا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا جس نے مجھے مارا تھا وہ خواب میں آتا ہے میں سو بھی نہیں سکتی کچھ ایسے ڈراتا ہے سجاد مجھے دے دو سجاد مجھے دے دو باہوں میں پانا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا جیتی تھی امامت کے میں پاک سویروں میں اب میری گزرتی ہے زنداں کے اندھیروں میں اس وقت بھی رسی میں اس وقت بھی رسی میں ہے میرا گلا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا کرتی ہے بہن وعدہ بابا کو نہ روئے گی اشکوں سے کبھی اپنا دامن نہ بھگوئے گی ان گھور اندھیروں سے ان گھور اندھیروں سے کروا دے رہا بھیا زندہ زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا سجاد سکینہ کو سجاد سکینہ کو مرنے سے بچا بھیا زندہ میں نہیں آتی کیوں تازہ ہوا بھیا
Hussain, 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 Hussain. Mu'minin, please recite Surah Fatiha for the following marhumeen. Fazle Abbas Jafari, Mubashara Khatun, Ibrahim Hassan, Haseen Bano, Shahla Zaidi, Nusrat Nakhvi, Sayyid Tahir Ali, and Ali Muzaffar Jafari. Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman. نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد قل هو الله أحد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوسيين السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء يا سيدة النساء العالمين السلام على الحسين وعلى علي ابن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا أبو الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين وقاسم ابن الحسن ومسلم ابن أخيل وهاني ابن عروة وحبيب ابن مظاهر والحر الشهيد رياهي السلام عليكم جميعا شهداء كربلاء وأسيران كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء السلام عليك يا معين الزوفاء والفقراء السلام عليك يا مغيث الشيعة والزوار في يوم الجزاء السلطان يا أبا الحسن يا علي ابن موسى الرضا روحي وجسمي لك الفداء ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا مولا يا صاحب العصر والزمان الأمان 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 السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا مظهر الإيمان السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كل وليك حجة بن حسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين نرى هادري
Yali. Jazakallah. This was again Sami Jafari reciting Dua-e-Faraj. Our Naha reciters for this evening were first and second Naha recited by Sahib-e-Bayaz of Anjuman-e Haidar-e-Karrar, Shan Ali, followed by the third Naha by Jafar Hussain. And Mu'mineen, this concludes our program for this evening. Please join us again this coming Thursday, September 24th at 8 p.m. for a new series of 4 Majlis, inshallah. And until then, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He keep you and your family safe and healthy. Good night and Shabba Khair.